Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today we have a big show for you. We're going to start off by breaking down the NFL franchise tag deadline that was yesterday, some of the big surprises that happened and did not happen. We're going to cover the NBA MVP race a little bit in segment 2. Segment 3, we are going to be talking about what NIL and the transfer portal could spell for the NCAA. And in segment 4, we are going to continue our coverage on the NHL trade deadline. There were a bunch of massive trades today, including a big player in Vladimir Tarasenko. We are going to talk about those trades as the hockey trade deadline wraps up on Friday. But before we get into it, remember that if you'd like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net to leave a tip or donation. Your message will pop up on the screen there for everyone to see. We'll have a little discussion about it. We appreciate anything that you guys do give. Again, one more time, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Like I was saying, we're going to start off our show with the big story from yesterday. That being the NFL franchise tag deadline hitting. For those who don't know, it is the first major deadline of the NFL offseason. It is the first deadline. The way this deadline works is it is the deadline to, as it says, tag those franchise players. After March 5th, there is no one that can be franchise tagged anymore. That doesn't mean that players that have been designated for the franchise tag cannot sign long-term contracts. All it means is that nobody else and no teams can use their franchise tag anymore. So there were a couple big surprises, and we kind of touched on it a little bit yesterday, but I wanted to go more in depth into some of these. And one of those teams that I was the most surprised by was the New York Giants. The fact that they did not decide to use the franchise tag on either Saquon Barkley or Xavier McKinney. And I know the big story heading into this offseason was that running backs, the running back market, same thing as last season, kind of mirrors it. We've talked a little bit about it before on the show, talking about how the running back, this is kind of like a bizarro version of the running back market from last season, where it's a lot of the same guys, but instead of getting franchise tagged, they're being let go. So it's a really, really, really deep running back free agent class. And that's only bolstered by, in my opinion, the second best running back in the league, or definitely top 5. He's definitely up there, Saquon Barkley. He becomes the best running back in that class, and probably the only running back in that class that's worth paying. Not to say that these other guys like Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard and Derrick Henry aren't worth paying, but Tony Pollard, we saw him as the lead guy in the last season with the Cowboys. We saw how that went. It wasn't great. The Cowboys had a great team. They had a great offensive line. They had a great quarterback. They had a great offense. They had a great defense. But Tony Pollard just wasn't getting it done. And if he couldn't get it done in that circumstance, I don't think it's going to really be worth paying him long term. Josh Jacobs, he led the league in rushing 2 seasons ago, and he kind of had a poor season. Injuries derailed it. That is the question with him long-term, injuries. And Derrick Henry is just kind of getting old. He still is a very effective runner. He still is one of the best running backs in all of football, but he's over 30 now. He finished up his second contract already. This will be his third contract. You don't see many running backs survive 3 contracts in the NFL. Not since the great Frank Gore. Have you seen a guy that's been good 3 contracts in? You know? I guess that's not true. There's Adrian Peterson played more recently than Frank Gore. He was up there. But those guys were freaks. Not to say that Derrick Henry isn't. He's still worth paying. I think there's two running backs in this class that I would be comfortable paying, and that's Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. Now, I would pay Saquon Barkley more just because he's a little younger. He is more versatile out of the backfield in the receiving game. And if you see what he had to do on the Giants last season, he is a really good blocker, a really good pass protector. That's one of the most underrated parts of his game is his pass protection. So taking a look at what he can do for a team, I think he's absolutely worth paying. He is he can do everything on a football field. So I think Saquon is going to get a bag somewhere, and a relative bag, I should say, because comparing it to other positions like quarterback or wide receiver, they're not going to get that much. But that's just the market for running backs right now. That's just where we're at in the way the NFL is valuing positions. So he's going to get paid a good amount for running backs. I could see him getting like a $15 million deal somewhere, which is really good for running backs nowadays. Derrick Henry is the other guy that I pay. I mentioned. I would probably put him somewhere around 10-ish, 10 million. Again, he's a little older, less term, around 10 mil, maybe 2 for 20 type deal. That's the type of contract that that's the max contract I'd be willing to give a guy like Derrick Henry. But the other big move that the Giants didn't make was tag Xavier McKinney. And all reports were that they weren't going to tag Saquon Barkley, but leaving a guy out like Xavier McKinney shocks me, quite honestly. The safety market is a deep one this year. The Bills just cut their entire defense today, which is really crazy. I didn't. That was breaking like 10 minutes before our show that they basically cut the entire defense. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But before that, Xavier McKinney is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. What he can do as your quarterback of the defense, as your center fielder at safety, is incredible, honestly. And I think I've mentioned this a good amount. The New York Giants defense, if you look at the overall metrics, weren't good. They had an abysmal start to the season, but from like week 10-ish on, they were a top 5, top 10 defense in the league by most metrics. And Xavier McKinney was a huge part of that. So I think it's a big mistake to let him walk. The reason that the Giants let him go is for a compensatory pick. So it came out in an article today that I was reading that the Giants didn't tag Xavier McKinney in order to get a compensatory pick if another team makes an offer that they can't match. So instead of putting a transition tag like the Patriots did with Kyle Duggar, which basically means they have right of refusal for contracts, like they can match it or not. They just didn't do any of that. They said they got rid of that in order to get a potential compensatory pick, a pick that might not even happen if they spend enough money. It's an odd move, honestly. It's something that I don't quite understand. Letting both of them walk seems like a mistake. You're losing a top 3 player on that defense and your best player on that offense. It's for a team that made the playoffs 2 years ago and seems like they want to try to continue to compete. They don't want to be in this cellar. They don't feel like a team that should be. I guess they do kind of feel like a team that should be in the cellar, but they got hit with a lot of injuries last year. And they've kind of put themselves in a bind with that Daniel Jones contract. They have to wait one more year before they can do anything. But I feel like they have to give him a fair shot. Not signing these guys seems like they're giving up on him. It probably isn't because like I said, free agency hasn't started yet. That starts in a week from today. There's plenty of time for them to make moves. But it feels like they're kind of giving up on the next season already. Which is not the kind of feeling you want to have as a fan of a team. The offseason should give you hope. you should be hopeful through the end of the draft if your team is doing things right. Because if your team drafts well and just doesn't completely mess up the offseason, being a fan gives you that hope that they've got these guys, they can compete, they're getting better. But it feels kind of hopeless as a Giants fan. It feels like they've already given up on the season, and that is not where you want to be as a franchise. Outside of the Giants, the Dolphins did not franchise tag Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins, their defensive tackle, he is again going to be a major piece in the free agency puzzle. He is expected to command about $20 million average annual value on his contract. He is going to attempt to reset the market. I don't think he will reset the market, but some team might do it. The Cardinals are one of those teams that are out there looking for really anything on defense, and getting a big guy in the middle that can stuff the run and get pressure on the passer in Christian Wilkins. It's tough to do both, especially with those defensive tackles that size. They might go out and give him that record-breaking contract. I believe right now the record contract is held by Dexter Lawrence of the Giants. If not, it's Daron Payne with the Commanders. It's one of those two. One of them just passed the other last season. I forget which one, but it was like a 4-year, $97 million deal for those guys. So I don't think he will quite reset the market, but he's going to be up there. He's going to be in the top 5 paid of the position. He's very, very good, and he deserves to get paid. The Dolphins still might bring him back. They don't quite have the cap space to do it. If they're signing a lot of the other guys they have back. Obviously, they're still in contract talks with Tua, but Christian Wilkins being on the market, Xavier McKinney being on the market, the safety market this season, especially this offseason, is going to be really interesting to watch. I mentioned Xavier McKinney already, but Kyle Duggar as well from the Patriots, who had a transition tag, he's not off the market. There's the safety duo. Like I said, the Bills cut their entire defense. The safety duo of Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, as well as Tre'Davious White. I'm baffled by what they're doing over there. And we'll break more of that down when I have time to look into it tomorrow. But there's a lot of hot, big-name safeties out there, a lot of guys that are still in their prime. I'm curious what the safety market is going to look like in the offseason. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. What do you think the safety market's going to look like? Which one of these guys is going to get the biggest contract? My money's on Xavier McKinney. He's a little younger than Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, and Kyle Duggar has that transition tag, so teams are going to be a little less gung-ho on signing him, I would say. But yeah, in our next segment coming up, we are going to transition into the NBA, talk about some of the NBA race, MVP race, and how it's developing, who currently has the lead, and what the cases are for the top 5 candidates, as well as a couple surprise candidates. Thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around through this first segment on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be right back.